Well, thank you. That's really flattering. I would love for you to take us through your fundraising journey. Where'd your first capital come in at? And then from there on, how did you attract such an amazing group of investors going forward, before you had a full product?
Yeah, I would say it takes a little bit of luck, a lot of determination, but the mentality of the founder is incredibly important. I was a bootstrap founder before this, right? Part of the statistics of Black founders with big ideas that weren't able to raise any capital. Same thing for women founders, same thing for other underserved and minority groups as well. And, I looked at the VCs like, people aren't going to invest in my company, but a lot of what I ended up doing to shoot myself in the foot was also not thinking big enough. I thought that to get started, I had to raise a $500,000 seed round because that's the most I would possibly be able to raise. And VCs would look at me and go, yeah, dude, we like you, but I don't think you quite understand your economics. You raise $500,000 and you have to hire your first 2 engineers, all your money is gone. You have no money for marketing, no operations, no legal. And to be honest with you, I didn't have the network when I was younger to even understand that. I just thought that has to be the number that I go out with. The unfortunate part for a lot of underserved entrepreneurs is it takes us a long while before, one, we develop the network, the courage to have those bigger ideas. So I'm talking to you all now in my late 30s, and I'd say that also has played a pretty large role in my ability to raise capital because my network has also grown with me. When I had the concept for Kinley, like it was literally a life or death moment for me, thinking I have a kid that's about to be born into this world. And if you can temporarily transport yourself back to 2020, that was political unrest, the murder of George Floyd, Kobe died, murder hornets, like everything that could go wrong kind of sort of went wrong in 2020. And all I could think about is I got to do something to make the world a better place for my kids, right? Selfishly. And through that, help everybody else too. And in the financial space, seeing my community go through the same cycle, generation after generation, like it was clear something had to happen or we have some really dark times ahead. And even with Kinley working hard, we still got some really dark times ahead of us. So when I approach VCs in my network, I made it clear a couple of different things. I don't want to work with any funds who just in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, decided that they wanted to spin up a special fund to work with minority entrepreneurs. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not going to be your cup of tea, right? I'd rather other entrepreneurs that you can find use your funds for that because I'm going big finally. And when I spoke to funds, my lead investor was Point72 Ventures, very large fintech fund. They don't invest a ton at all in neobanks. They invest in a lot of third-party providers like DriveWealth, Zero Hash. DriveWealth is the engine behind Cash App's investment tool, Zero Hash, cryptocurrency, a lot of bank sponsors, so like very deep in the fintech space. And when I met with them, a partner at that firm, he asked me, hey, do you mind if I bring on, one of our GPs? I'm like, whoa. So general partner and like, sure. GP comes on, is like, Donald, I've had this idea for a long time, working at JP Morgan Chase. I've always believed that if Black America had a specific focus, somebody that thought about equity and wealth building, that it could be a winner. And what I appreciated so much about them is that they didn't see an investment in Kinley as their gold star for 2020, which a lot of companies did, want to latch themselves in any company they could. They go, here's what we did, to fight racism and police brutality. Believe it or not, and I always like to bring this up too, just to show you how when I mention life or death, it almost kind of sort of felt like a joke. Typically when our community goes through cycles like that, policy never comes out of it, right? And so when I started seeing the solutions that we were being provided was Aunt Jemima changing her name to Pearl Milling, statues being removed, and my personal favorite, the Realty Board in the state of Texas decided that to fight systemic racism, they will no longer call master bedrooms master, they will now be called main. And when I read that article, I'm like, oh my God, like somebody's really punking us, right? So that's the attitude that I went into VC meetings with. Like, here's what I'm building. It's going to be massive, massively underserved market. Over half of Black America is either unbanked or underbanked. And I want to go big. And my investors got it. Typically, as founders, we go through hundreds of investor meetings. I was very pointed. I was very upfront with the folks that I met with, what I wanted to do, how the big aspiration that they had to join in on. We met with 8 funds, and 7 of the 8 invested. We were originally raising $3 million. Another fund that had an interest wanted to invest more. I went back to my lead investor, very unique conversation, and go, hey, thank you so much for the term sheet. Can you add another $500,000 so I can raise $5 million? And they agreed. And in about a month and a half, we ended up closing a $5 million seed round and moved forward, right, with focusing on building the team with such an audacious roadmap, right? You know, investing in one company to get 8 different companies, 8 different revenue streams. That's really what we wanted our investors to bet on. And we also knew it was going to be capital intensive. So we continued to kind of scale from there. And we're lucky enough to add Forerunner Ventures in our A round and raised another $15 million. And the neobank space is a wild space. It's very expensive, cash intensive, but if you get it right, like it's pretty special. And a lot of companies struggle, right, to get to that point. But we have great capital partners around us. We built and developed a great team. We're getting a lot of early validation from our market, and onward and upwards.
Yeah, that's incredible. There's a lot in there that I wanted to double click on, but one that really stuck out to me actually, and this is totally off topic, I think, is you said that when you were first raising your initial rounds of institutional capital, that coming from an underrepresented background in venture capital, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur that's kind of in that same position? Because I think here at Georgia State, there's a lot of first-gen college students, and so I think any insights to help out with entrepreneurs looking to raise institutional capital would be really, really helpful.
For sure, there's several different things. So one, I would say, understand the type of entrepreneur that you want to be, right? There's a strategy to this thing where there are some founders whose first concept, they don't want it to be a unicorn. They want it to be a zebra or a donkey, right? Build that repertoire, right? Get that first company out of the door if that's the route you want to go, right? You can sell a company for $50 million, $100 million. You go and talk to somebody like Rocket, and they're going to look back and go, great, like this guy has positive traction, has done this before, exited, wasn't a big exit, but hey, that's a win because most people don't get to do that. Or go big, right? But if you go big, do your homework, right? There's a lot of things that founders do where we hurt ourselves before we even start. Because if you put yourselves in the seat of a venture capitalist, the earlier you go, typically they're making a gut check on, do I believe this guy, this girl can build this thing? And in most cases, founders, especially early stage founders, first time founders, of course you don't have all the experience, right? Like you're figuring stuff out, you discovered a pain point, that's cool, but what can you do to mitigate that risk for the investor? So I always tell founders, like, put a lot of effort and energy into shoring up gaps that you have. If you want to build a company, to turn H2O into jet fuel, and there actually is a company right now, like in California, working on that, which is crazy to me. But what do you need? If you were an investor, what would that team look like? Would you need to have some type of engineer that worked at NASA? Would it need to be some type of, biochemist from MIT? And if you don't have any of that experience, can you pick up a phone? Can you go to LinkedIn? Can you email someone and say, hey, I'm looking for advisors, for this concept? I put together this formula that I want to test, and I want an award at Georgia State for best blah, blah, blah. Think about even that still being pretty light traction, but think about having advisors in that field and a contest and at least a plan versus what most founders do, which is, hello, VC, my name is Donald Hawkins, and I'm going to turn H2O into jet fuel. And the VC goes, awesome. Talk to me about your background. Worked at Wendy's, for a couple of years, and was looking at the NASA channel on TV and realized that there's this resource, water. Why not turn it into jet fuel? So that's a very absurd example, but that's exactly how VCs see it. So there's so much that we can do as founders to mitigate that risk. Even waitlist. That's how Kinley was able to raise his initial round of funding, which I missed. During the midst of 2020, I went to Facebook groups, I went to WhatsApp groups and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but I put this page together. If you're interested, share it with your network and join. 35,000 people later, we were able to raise the $5 million seed round. And the reason that investors were okay with that was because they realized, okay, this guy has no funding, there's no product, but he's been able to prove that he can acquire customers for free. That's a win. That's a great start, because the name of the game in the neobank space is low-cost customer acquisition, low-cost downloads, low-cost account openings, low-cost funding. And that's really what our investors have bet on, that we will get better than industry average metrics across all those different categories. Something else for founders, I think to also think about too, is go to the right VC at the right stage, and you have to shift the mentality. This took me the longest time to figure out. The VC world does not exist without crazy founders, right? It's us. VCs make bets on a lot of companies, fully well knowing that only a few of those companies will be able to replenish the fund. You have to make sure that you have the confidence to make them realize that you are the person that can make it happen. Typically, underserved founders, we go in because we don't see a lot of people that look like us raising capital. And the conversation is really more so like, hey, can you help me? If you can just give me just the bare minimum, $500,000, I'm going to turn H2O into water or into jet fuel. And the VCs are like, yeah, you don't get it, right? Because to do that, you're going to have to pay engineers $250,000 per year. Your scientist is going to cost $350 plus. You're going to have benefits. You're going to need at least 10 million just to start, right? And we don't think that big, so mentality wise, if you're going to go big, go all the way and be able to back up what it is you need to raise. That's something, if I could snap my finger and just impart that on everybody, like right now, that would be it. The VC industry does not exist without us. I work my butt off, right? I sacrifice time with my family, right? I have likely impacted my health. I mean, like those things are natural, right? Because I'm wired that way. When I sleep, I'm thinking, I'm working, right? I wake up at 3:30 in the morning. Last night, this is a great idea, or here's something we need to catch. And my VCs want me to take care of myself, which is great. Like those are also the type of partners that you want, but my job is to provide them outsized returns, right? But they want to bet on founders that have that mentality, that get up and go get it. Another easy thing that founders can do to also help mitigate risk is prove to VCs that you can build a team. If you never built a company before and you're a solo founder and you don't know how to code, you don't have an engineering background, you don't have a science background, how do they know that if they hand you a check for $5 million, $10 million, that you can go and build a team if you've never done it before? Give them some positive proof points. Go and, I tell you one thing that I did with a few startups ago. I went and messaged folks from large companies, said, hey, I'm thinking about building this thing. Would love to have a conversation with you based on your experience covering X, Y, and Z. You mind having a 15-minute call? Every one of those 15-minute calls turned into 30 or 45-minute calls. And the call always ended the same way. In the event that I'm able to raise capital, would you have an interest in joining me as insert position name? And everyone that said yes, I said, hey, do you mind if I use, your image and your name on a pitch deck for prospective investors? Most of them said yes. Now, all of a sudden, single founder, without all the experience that I need for whatever project that is, I now have a pitch deck that says prospective team. And now VCs are able to go to LinkedIn, look up those profiles, go, oh, wow, engineer, NASA. Am I going to be able to get that person? Maybe, if I get the right amount of funding. So again, so many things that we can do as founders, but what the positive proof point that provides is that the VC goes, this guy, this girl knows how to go out and get it. Even the easy work, a LinkedIn message that turned into a phone call, that turned into somebody that is a prospective employee.
Yeah, that's super helpful. So you talked a lot about, how you position yourself and your company to VCs, but it's a two-way street, right? Like at the end of the day, you're selecting who you're going to partner with. So talk to me about some of those conversations that went well and, what you really liked that kind of convinced you that these were the investors that you wanted to partner with.
Added value, baby. A lot of it is being true to yourself as an entrepreneur. There's some VCs that are extremely hands-off. There are other VCs that want to be all up in your business. And a lot of founders don't like that. And I disagree with them. The VCs invest in you because they want you to help replenish their fund. And you want to partner with VCs that have skill sets that you don't have or that can enhance skill sets that you already have. Specifically for my case, in the fintech space, I was kind of greedy. I knew that I wanted to work with very expensive third-party providers, and the most economical way that I could get the best possible deal with those companies is if I had the same investors. Then it worked. So now I work with some third parties that other neobanks can't afford to work with, and I got a great deal to work with them. Plus, also being able to reach out to Point 72 and their chief product officer, Dave Matter, and say, hey, thinking about this thing in the neobank space, what do you think? Dave knows everybody. So he's able to give me inside info before other neobanks even figure it out. And my Series A, Forward Ventures, was super, like, got lucky. But it was a match made in heaven. They're consumer-focused fund. They've only invested in 2 neobanks, Chime and us. And so one, like, super big honor for us to even, work with them. We also received the biggest check they ever wrote, out of the current fund that they had. But the benefit that they provide is they know how to reach consumers. They were the first big check in Warby Parker, Dollar Shave Club, Bonobos, Away. So clearly I feel I'm pretty good figuring out how to get consumers. They are way better at getting consumers than I am. And I like how involved they are. So I think when you think about the VC fund that you want to partner with, it's a marriage, right? You all are going to be locked in at the hip. You want somebody that if you could imagine going to war with you, not just when things are good, because things are always good after you raise capital, right? You get the press, the tech crunch, pats on the back, you got to get the hoodie, right? But the tough part about startup is like 95% of what the job is. It's putting out fires. It's dealing with stuff that you never hear about in the news. And you want people that will ride or die with you, right? That you can pick up the phone when you're at your lowest, especially as a founder, right? Very lonely position, right? Being able to pick up the phone and say, I'm dealing with this, right? I don't know how to get through it. Like, can you help? Those are the folks that you want to think about partnering with, right? There are some VCs, again, that they kind of take your lead, right? The more you keep them involved, the better. And I've learned a lot, even in my current journey, right? Founders that stay in contact with their VCs and partners are able to gain and glean insights before they even need it, right? The finances aren't quite looking right. If you're having trouble hiring folks, either you tell them at a quarterly board meeting or biannual board meeting, it's like, oh man, you just lost 4 months of, getting insight or connections to things, or you keep that person connected and go, you know what, Donald, like, seeing these reports, like, I think we should maybe, take a look at maybe running this type of campaign. Like, oh, that's great. How do you know that? Oh, because you work with hundreds of other companies, doing the exact same thing. So of course you know more than I do. And I think that's the most important thing. Like, doing business with people that you like, is going to be important. And also, when you interview them, ask them, like, listen, how'd you handle tough situations with companies that you work with? Like, if a founder were to call you at like midnight with X issue, like, what would your typical response be? And you'd be surprised. Some V's are like, listen, call me 3 a.m. I want all of it, right? And others, might say, call this person and they'll email me if you need something. And then you can make your decision on if that's the right partner for you.
I imagine that the past, call it 8 months or so, 10 months, past year has been a little tumultuous, right? There's, multiples are compressing, valuations are dropping. And I think might have been, look, you were coming out of the seed or the Series A, right? So still pretty early on, a lot of developments in the company. I'm sure you had your fair share of 3 a.m. calls that you wanted to make. So I'd love to hear about kind of how those calls went with your investors and how they supported you through this like tumultuous time.
Yeah, the best investors are the ones that are like proactive. And I was fortunate, right? I had, some angel investors and, some of our larger investors, they reached out to me, right? Because the market changed so quickly. Like, I felt like January, February, March, everything was still like 2021. And I don't know what the heck happened in April, but it all switched. And I started getting the phone calls, and some of the phone calls were like, it's looking like this thing is headed this way, but we don't know. And then I got other calls a little bit later. It's like, yeah, conserve, right? We raised our Series A funding kind of with the mandate to grow fast. In the neobank space, really all about customer acquisition, and you'll think about revenue later. Game has changed. Now people actually care about engagement. People care about revenue. And those were things that a lot of neobanks weren't thinking about. So for us, it was really leaning into, our investor network on setting up distribution partnerships. We conducted a RIF, toughest decision and toughest day of my life, having to part ways with team members. And if you've never done that before, there's no way you can normalize it unless you talk with somebody that has experienced what that looks like, how to handle it. And as a result of me leaning into that, we were able to successfully offboard those team members, like without any massive event. That was also a scary thing in the day and age of social media. But also being able to put programs in place where we developed an offboarding program where we have team members that we actually have now helped get placed with other companies. It's not something that I was accustomed to, didn't have that experience, and that's when, I really knew I had the right people around the table, like literally flying out to California and sitting at the kitchen table, of investors late at night, ordering sushi from DoorDash, and having those real tough conversations about what I want to do with the company, where we're headed, and what we need to scale and succeed. And breaking down those barriers is especially hard, I feel, for underserved entrepreneurs, because we typically don't have that network of folks that we can pick up the phone and call and go, hey, man, like I noticed you did this. How'd that happen? Right? The network isn't there. So there's fear, because there's also not a lot of representation, in the VC market of folks that look like us either. So again, I got super fortunate, with the group of capital partners that I have, but I also put a lot of work into developing those relationships, right? In a remote first world, we raised all of our funding via Zoom, right? Not normal. Normally you would have to fly over, kiss baby, shake hands, and do those things. But, investing that time and energy into developing that relationship so that my capital partners get to know me, how I think, my pros, my cons, my strengths, my flaws, really helped us out. And, and relationships matter, relationships with customers, relationships with team members, and also relationships with capital partners.
Yeah, and the VC world, relationships are everything, right? So I think it's time. I want to hear some war stories. What are some of the worst encounters you've had with investors? Things to avoid if you're trying to build a relationship with an entrepreneur.
If any VC gives you signals, and I've had several say, well, you know what, Donald, I've never seen anybody like you do this. Red flag, right? Because of course they're going to try to spin it to go, your age or that specific market. There are some people, in the VC space, like they are creatures of habit, right? If I were to say, close your eyes and I'm going to build out this perfect founder, he dropped out from Stanford, his junior year, after successfully winning, the pitch deck competition, for bioengineering. And he decided that his father, who was a chemical engineer, as his first angel investor, is going to build this biochemical solution that will cure cancer, right? There are probably angels outside lining up to write a check right now, right? And that is the breakdown, I feel, in the VC space, just in general, where there is bias, right? So that's something that I look out for a lot. I don't want anybody to use me, as a pawn to say, hey, team, high five, we got our diversity quota. Congratulations, Donald. In fact, I purposefully, when different entities reach out to try to add me to list, for fundraising, like, nah, I prefer to be not included, because I don't want anybody to think that the metrics are headed in a positive direction, because statistically they're just not, which is a bad thing. Probably say another horror story is with what I'm building now, is when you meet with people and they don't see your vision because they don't understand your market, but they think they know, right? Now, the cool thing is a lot of the initial calls that I had with everybody that invested, it ended up being like educational, right? I'm dropping statistics. They're learning more about the community, because if you haven't had, density or experience with the community, a lot of things you don't know. A lot of people don't know that Black America is 12% of the US population, but we make up 25% of Twitter's US user base. when I mention the word culture, to investors, like they don't quite get it, but we see culture that my community imparts, on America through music, through sports, through fashion, like on a consistent basis. But does the VC space get that? Right. So I kind of also look out for red flags from people who aren't open to learning new things or experiencing new markets. I've also had other instances where people, have you thought about making this a nonprofit? Like, yeah, maybe Chime should do that too, right? Maybe Moneyline should as well. You know what? Cash App Foundation sounds like a great idea, right? Don't diminish my idea, because, of your bias. Something else I would say maybe to look out for, and this is another experience, is when it comes to valuations. That's always a funny thing. And that also took me a while to kind of figure out how that works. Going into meetings thinking I gotta come out with this valuation, I kind of learned that like that's a silly way to look at it, right? And I've had VCs like offer like crazy low valuations, right? And in some instances earlier in my career, I took it just to get the money before realizing, wait a minute, did I just give up 40% of my company for that $500,000? And I guess, Rocky, you could technically look at me and go, yeah, your company's done at that point, right? Like as a VC, you kind of just know, like, yeah, you're done. Because if you need to raise another round of funding and you give up another 15 to 20%, like, yeah, you just got started. It's over, right? But now, I base it off of the amount of funding that I want to raise. And that kind of goes back to like a tip for anybody that wants to start a company as well. Just tie the amount of funding that you need to raise based on the people you need to hire and the objectives that you want to reach over a specific amount of time. It's easier to tell an investor that you need to raise a $5 million round if you have a company where you're going to have to hire engineers. In this kind of market, mid-level to senior level engineers, you're looking at 150 to 200 plus. So you get 5 or 6 of them, you're clearly already, crossing the $1 million mark just with engineers. But you also need product, you also need marketing, you need operations as well. And when I started putting the focus on my valuation being just simply a multiple of what I needed to raise, it sways all the other issues that I had. Right. So if I need to raise $3 million, I only want to give up 20% of my company at this stage. So now we have a valuation, unless you disagree with the amount I need to raise, which I've never had a VC when I kind of switched the model to focus on what that money is used for. Nobody pushes back. Right. But if you just do the casual need to raise $5 million, 10% here, 30% there, like, no, just make them feel better about where their money's going. Another horror story, and this is actually one that I experienced with the company I have now. Met with a VC in the valuation conversation. Was able to raise my Series A, $15 million at a pretty good multiple, so 65 post. Y'all are family, so I don't mind sharing. And I met with another VC who offered me about half that valuation. Like, dude, like do the math. If I raise the Series C at this amount and you're giving me this, like that's a 1.5x multiple. Like, what are you seeing that other folks aren't seeing? And I took it personal because I didn't quite understand. I found out later this person had really bad information from what they thought I raised in the seed round. They just mixed it up, but there are some instances where founders will be talked into valuations based off of them simply not knowing their numbers, because we want the money so we can scale and grow, and nobody likes raising capital. Like, it's a full-time job, a lot of rejection that's included in that, a lot of diligence, but at the same time you're still running your company full-time and dealing with all the things that comes with it as well. So I would say maybe being careful, and knowing your numbers before you even meet with the VCs is going to be really important. Any more wounds you want to hear?
No, I think you've covered some really good ones. I've got maybe one more question, and then we can open up to the folks here to ask any questions that they want. I guess what are some tips that you can give to these students on relationship building as they go out and try to source, a good seed stage investment?
A friend of mine named Toby Rush, great entrepreneur, sold a company called I verified to Alibaba some years ago, tells the story about how him and a bunch of college classmates had a professor that told them, to think about what their life looked like in the future. He knew a lot of them were friends, and he was like, could you imagine how awesome your life would be if you continue to do life with each other, right? And it really dug into that during that semester. And they took that to heart. And many of them ended up buying homes in the same neighborhood in Kansas. Kids have grown up together. They've been able to deal with grief together, success and joy together. Somebody had to be out of town. They got uncles and aunties right around the corner. And when he mentioned that, it hit me in a very specific way. Another conversation that I had with a friend of mine from Nigeria, she mentioned how in the West, America, we focus so much on independence, right? Hustle, grind. Like, I got to get mine before you get yours. I'm going to put everybody on, but I got to get mine first. And she mentioned how foreign that concept was to her and people in Nigeria, in Africa, because there they focus on interdependence, right? They want to grow together. And that messed me up because I realized, I looked at my company, I was like, oh my God, I have nobody in my company that like is a family member or like a friend that I grew up with. They're all folks that I just developed within my network. Why is that? Like, I grew up with super smart people. I have amazing family members, amazing friends. How come I never thought about building things with them? And it's really made me think about relationships differently. You have some people that are super transactional with relationships where they only pop up when they need something. And then you have other people that are pros when it comes to relationships. They actually put in the work to reach out, call, speak to people, to keep that line of communication tight. And for me, because of how busy I am, a lot of times I skew more towards the transactional side. And that's a flaw. That's not a good thing. All right. I was fortunate enough when raising capital to have that one connection with Point 72 that I'd been in contact with over the years. He knew me, I knew him, he knew I thought big. And if it wasn't for him running things, I probably would not have been able to raise the capital as quickly as I did. Relationships for the win. So as you think about the lives that you all are living, how you want to do life when you get older, I try to force myself to try to always think about what the 10-year-old or what the Donald 10 years in the future would say to the Donald now. What would he look back and say? Like, am I spending enough time with my kids? Am I putting enough effort and energy into my health and just mental well as well? And just really thinking about the future. But relationships work the same way. There are people right now, that are your friends, associates, that 5 years from now will be doing something that you're not even thinking about now. I'm at an age where people that I grew up with are city managers. Shannon James here in town running Aerotropolis, the nonprofit that is working to develop the city around the airport. And, folks that are, police chiefs. I'm like, man, I'm getting old, but my network is amazing now, right? And that was something I was really fortunate where the schools that we went to and the neighborhoods that we grew up in, we kind of had like the baseline of being connected. So it actually is not difficult for me to pick up the phone with anybody from my hometown and we pick it right back up where we left off. That's just the way it works. But the more intentional you are now with developing those relationships, whether that be with VCs, whether that be with founders, with each other, with engineers, you will be surprised at how much that impacts your life in a positive way. The opposite isn't worth it, right? When you need something and calling somebody for the first time after 5 years, like, not the best thing. Rocky and I have been in contact, since a year ago, just typical check-ins and, he'll call and say, hey, Donald, we're doing this thing at Morehouse. You mind popping through? And I'll do it, right? One, because I like Rocky and I love what UGF is doing, but also, two, because I want to keep those relationships tight. After I exit massively with Kinley, I want to go back and go, listen, you know what? I remember seeing you. Like, I remember your face from the Morehouse event, right? I want to have those connections so I can be your investors too, but relationships matter. The more you sow into it, the better your life will be.
That's incredible advice, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Awesome. Well, yeah, if y'all have questions, just go ahead and actually speak into the mic so we can get it on the camera here.
Okay, so I'm JJ. So
JJ.
You're in college, right? You have the idea. You don't have the product. You don't have barely have any technical skills, or you know what I mean. Where do you go from next? Because if you know what I mean.
Well, it's kind of like one of the things that I mentioned earlier. Like, put yourself in the shoes of the VC and ask yourself, if JJ were to come and meet with me, what would I need to see? And just be direct with yourself. Like, you gotta pass the internal, diligence test. Like, founders sometimes can gas themselves up. Like, yeah, man, I'm gonna go and change the world. But you look in the mirror, like, yeah, no, I got no clue how this product is going to be built. I got no clue where to start. So start there, right? And like, what are my flaws? What am I missing? What would make it impossible for this VC or this capital partner to say no? What can I do to mitigate my venture? Should I look at tax credits? Should I go the angel route? Should I go the family office route? And you all are super smart, right? And you all have access to everything pretty much that you need in front of you, in a computer, on a phone. Go to LinkedIn, find other students at the school, get a professor. I mean, how many startups have we seen, where students have actually gone to professors first and get the professor to buy in, and now you have potentially get Georgia State to fund a grant, for that idea. There's so many different things you can do. Just don't let lack of resources stop you. And VCs are actually more interested in founders who are resourceful, because the easy proof point is, man, imagine what would happen if that guy got money, right?
To I guess expand on that, what are some of your flaws that you've had in the beginning of starting, your business?
How much time we got? I got plenty.
Okay.
So many flaws. I mean, one is thinking that I'm smart enough to not need customer discovery. Stupid. Like, I can't tell you how many mistakes I made because I thought I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm going to come up with a concept and idea and people are going to buy it. Nobody is smarter than the customers, right? Customer discovery trumps everything. And that's something else that's really simple too. I'm glad you brought that up. Like, proof point. Imagine you have a concept or an idea. You have this thesis, but it's not validated. How difficult would it be for you to pick up a phone and call 10 prospective customers, 50 prospective customers, 100 prospective customers? Can you go and get some of these people to be interviewed? Can you get them on video, right? And then imagine just taking that proof point, going to an investor and say, listen, I polled 100 prospective customers on this prospective product. And of these 100, 80% said they were very interested. Those 80% also said they would pay this much for it. And that if I had this product built, that they would sign up within 2 months. Is that not the perfect founder to invest in? And all you invested was time, right? Probably said another flaw is doing the exact opposite of what I told you to do, right? Just not going through the full diligence, like, of realizing what my gaps were. Instead, sometimes it's easier for people to meet with VCs, and when the VCs tell you all the reasons that they're not going to invest, just get mad at the VC. They don't know what they're talking about. No, like, you just didn't have your stuff together, right? So get your stuff together. And again, it does not have to be based on money. It does not have to be based on developing a product. The easiest thing for your generation to do that my generation could not afford was get product designs. Product designs are like super affordable. Like, y'all can now use tools like Fiverr and Upwork and get somebody to put together a sketch of an app, a website with no engineering involved, just an idea, right? Back when I was, in college, like, that was a very expensive endeavor, right? You kind of had to raise a pre-seed round just to get the designs, but now you all can do that for a couple $100.
My name is Robert. Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you.
I wanted to ask you two questions. One is about Kinley, and one is going to be about finding proper companies. So, about Kinley, you said that you're open to giving credit to those that are not being given loans, right? Does it happen that those people that don't get loans are more are higher credit risk, or is just human prejudice?
Great question. Love that question. Very unpopular thing that I say that people don't like, but it's the truth. The current credit system and actuaries in the banking system, they work, right? It's ugly, but it works. But they don't factor in socioeconomic reasons, right? You think about the Black community, we don't have the same ability, right, to generate the same income as a lot of other communities in the space. And the credit system and the way that was established, was set up as a system of control. So if you have a community of people who are significantly underpaid compared to other communities, who also have not had fair access, to wealth building initiatives, then how can you expect them to also have a similar level of credit and also income? It doesn't make sense. So the way we look at it is we realize that banks and a lot of the lending partners they're limited. It's just credit and income. But if I were to tell you that you had two customers that you could lend to, customer A made $5,000 per month, credit score was 620, but they had a high yield savings account, they had an investment account, and their net income each month was $1,500 versus customer B, credit score 710, they make $9,000 per month, but they only take home from that 9,000, maybe their net is $200 per month. The banks right now would lend to customer B, regardless of that person's financial background and experience, showing that they're probably not the best customer. As a neobank, the luxury that we have is we get all the data. I get to see how my customers are spending money. I get to see what % of their money is going into high yield savings, eventually crypto, eventually investments. And I don't mind making a broader credit decision on a customer that other banks might pass over because I know that customer better. So the unfortunate part, again, is that the current system works, but for the way they want. There's 100% bias, into it. And we know that because we can see all the fines that incumbent banks keep paying, for underserved communities.
I could not imagine, eye-opening. Seriously, thank you. And about the seed, so our goal is to find seed projects, and a lot of it is determined by the idea and the tenacity that a founder entails with it, right? The ability to work hard, just like you described yourself. And could you give us some pointers on what should we look for when we're talking to these founders? There's a lot of things, and it's hard to gauge what a person can do.
Completely agree. So I feel some of the key things that you want to look at when you choose like winners, right? First off, like, is a person coachable, right? Another question JJ asked me was flaws that I had. One was that I was unflappable when it came to like my idea. Like, I'm gonna make this work no matter what. That's not a good trait for a founder, right? Most ventures never start off how they end up, period. You have to be willing to float. You have to be willing to say that your baby is ugly. You have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to pivot. If you have a founder and you can just see from the way the conversations are going that, hey, have you thought about this? And they push back on everything, that founder's probably still in their early phase of growing. They're going to learn, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be painful. And I went through all of that too. You want a founder that has that tenacity, but you also want somebody that has the propensity to build plans, right? Like, yes, that's a big idea, but do you have any type of a general plan to get to that end goal? You don't have to give me a plan to get all the way there, but just show me you know how to get it started. And pro tip, if you have a founder that says, listen, I feel I have this big goal that I want to hit, but I'm going to have to do this in phases. Phase 1 for me is X, Y, and Z. That's a great sign, because what that shows is that that person has, a touch on reality, and they're not just going by spreadsheet. Like, and another thing that I've done before, like, you build in projections, and I swear Excel always has a way of showing you're going to generate $8 billion in revenue in 8 months. I don't know how it keeps doing that, but we insert the numbers, right? But finding founders who are in touch with reality in that they have a plan and phase they want to go through is a great signal. One, it's going to show that they're coachable, but also pragmatic in their approach for growth. Another good signal, people who don't mind telling you that they don't know what they don't know. I mean, that to me is a pro tip for VCs, asking somebody a question that you know the founder doesn't have the answer to. One or two things are going to happen. Some of us will filibuster and we'll give you an answer that won't make sense, but we'll quickly try to move on to the next question. Others will say, you know what, that's a great question. I need to look into that. Never heard of that before. Great signal for a founder. Once again, shows that they're coachable. And I think as you all push back on concepts and you poke holes, typically you can find out pretty quickly if that's a founder who's like, nah, they're not going to budge any bit at all. And maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they just really know their stuff, but you'll also know that based off of the conversation that you have with them too.
So avoid potential arrogance, right?
VCs call it that, and I feel like founders that have confidence in themselves, there's a way that it could come across to some people, as arrogance, but if you back it up with data, then right, is that arrogance, or can you show me the path that led you to that thought? So yeah, but I would say right at that line, you just want to be confident, confident in what you do know, be confident in what you don't know.
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Zion.
It's having those, you have to tear down walls and have those deep conversations early. Like typically, like when VCs invest in companies, they also like develop a post-mortem. Like even when they see the term sheet, here's why this company's not going to work, right? Very few founders have that direct conversation because we want to be locked arm in arm, mission aligned. This is going to work. We're going to change the world, but nobody wants to have the conversation about what if it doesn't, right? And the quicker you get to that, on worst case scenarios, it typically helps sober things a bit, right? And then also have a contract with each other, like either a written one or something that you all just have, like verbals. Like, here's how we're always going to handle disputes. Build a baseline. Like, you think about everything in life, the stronger the foundation, the better it is. If a marriage has a strong baseline and a foundation, great. If you have developed a friendship with somebody who saved you from a bully, like in preschool, you're going to be rocking with that person likely for the rest of your life. Why? Because the foundation is strong. But with founders, so many times we have an idea, we get excited, we run to our friends like, yo, we're going to make so much money. Let's get this thing going, right? And we skip the foundation building steps because what you have is a foundation built on friendship. Business is different, right? So tear down those walls early, have the ugly conversations early, and build that contract, right? So when the bad things happen, and they always will, you have something to listen, here's what we agreed to, here's how we're going to handle this, right? And if that person, doesn't want to agree to what you all agreed to previously, then you now have a good idea. It's probably not the best person for me to be in business with.
We got to wrap. We got to keep going on time, but you'll have the opportunity to talk to Donald later on. Hey, I always love having you come to these events, man. You impart some like really impressive and valuable knowledge to the students whenever you come through. So really appreciate you coming by again.
Happy to do it, Rocky. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Donald. Yeah, just feel free to connect with Donald on LinkedIn. I'll post his info later on. Okay. Let's talk about deal sourcing. Man, the party just went outside. That's right. Donald's an incredible entrepreneur. He's one of my favorite founders. So anytime we can grab any of his time for stuff like this, I try to take that opportunity from him. So probably a little too much, but anyways, hope that was helpful and educational for y'all. Okay, so our first workshop is going to be on deal sourcing, right? So as part of the competition, we talk about there are three things, well, really four things that venture capitalists are good at, right? Number one is finding really good companies to invest in. The second piece is convincing the entrepreneur to let you invest in that company. And then the third thing is to do diligence on that company and then pick the right winners, right? The fourth thing is portfolio company support. So as Donald talked about, he likes to partner with some really incredible investors that are helping him build his company and go through this journey with him, right? We're not gonna work on that part. You're not gonna have the opportunity to work with these companies. So we're just gonna focus on deal sourcing and due diligence. Now, here we go. Okay, so quick agenda. We're gonna talk about, really there's two ways to go about deal sourcing. It's called thematic and opportunistic. So we'll talk about a little bit of both on those. And then we'll go over deadlines and deliverables, and then we'll close it out. I'll stick around for a bit. I know a couple of you are newer to the competition, and so I'll give you information on where to sign up, where to find teams, so on and so forth. Now, thematic versus opportunistic. Really the difference here is one is a little more proactive. They're both proactive. You can't just sit back and find good deals. But the way that I like to describe the difference is the hunter or a farmer. Right. So if you're a thematic investor, you are more the hunter in that you are developing a specific type of target that you're going after. Right. You're going to survey the field and you're going to go after that type of company. On the other side, you've got opportunistic. And so that's more relationship driven. Right. So in a lot of cases, I've built up relationships with a lot of the funds around Atlanta. And the way that I source my deals is through a monthly call. Like, hey, what deals are you looking at right now? Here's what I'm looking at. Maybe this fits your profile. Oh, there's like an extra couple million here. Would love for you to fill that round, right? So relationships is really where the opportunistic side of it is. It's not thematic. You're not looking for a specific company in a sector. It's what are some of the deals that you're looking at? Oh, this sounds interesting. Let's go chase that down, right? And so VCs are generally doing some of both, but will generally focus on one. So here at University Growth Fund, we're more opportunistic as investors. But you think about a company here in Atlanta like TTV Capital, like a really great fintech investment fund, and that's what they do, is they invest specifically in fintech. Okay, so on the hunter side of it, we're going to spend the first little bit talking about thematic investing. So the way that thematic investing works is you sort of envision what the world is going to look like in 5 to 10 years, and then you make investments around that decision. So we're not talking about making investments for companies like 50 years from now, right? We want to know what is going to be successful in the next 5 to 10 years. Because remember that VCs invest and harvest their investments over a 5 to 10 year period. So, when we say think about what the future is going to look like, we're not talking about 100 years from now. We're talking about the next 5 to 10 years. And if you're thoughtful and honest about what you think is going to change in the next 5 to 10 years, you can typically find some really cool companies to invest in along that theme. So who's heard of this firm before? Yeah, Sequoia is arguably one of the best VCs in the world, as evidenced by their continued success, like going back to the 70s even. They've consistently invested in the top companies at an early stage and have seen success over time. Now, you might assume that because of their brand, that it would be raining deals on them, right? So they'd be opportunistic in nature in that they've got deals coming in the door, they're just picking the best ones and so on and so forth. They actually describe their success, or they attribute their success to thematic investing, right? So they pick verticals, they envision the future and they go and try to find the best companies in that space. They'll talk to all of them and then pick the very best ones. Maybe it's based on the company, maybe it's based on the founding team or the market that they're in, right? So here's an example of some of the greatest companies that Sequoia's invested in. And by no means is this like a comprehensive list, but they were early investors in some of the greatest companies, right? And it's because they take this thematic approach of investing. So I've got this like funny video. Does anyone watch or has anyone seen the show Silicon Valley on HBO? It's a great show, especially if you want to work in VC. Here's like a really funny clip from that kind of illustrates what thematic investing can look like, right? If you find and identify problems potentially in the future, you can go and invest around that. and hopefully the audio will work. Oh, here we go. Oops.
I know that you are incredibly busy with this. I made a personal promise to the Astronaut guys that none of their employees will lose their job, which will happen at midnight.
See this? Did you know Walker? No. Not the same. This seed atop the breading. Those are sesame seeds. A high number of these breadings have sesame seeds on them. Billions of breadings. Sesame seeds. They only grow in certain microclimates.
Peter, I know that you would want to cause 173 people in North Carolina.
Okay. This is ridiculous. Mr. Gregory, we need an answer and we need it now. Yes, we need money now. And I'm sure that Burger King and Sesame Seeds and whatever else you've been mumbling about in here all seem lovely to think about, but they have more than no more of this. Okay, are we getting the money or not? Will you please tell us what the hell is going on? Amusing coincidence that two of the three countries that provide the world's sesame seeds have such large cicada populations. No? The cicadas of Myanmar emerge every 13 years, while the Brazilian cicadas emerge every 17. Next year, they will hatch simultaneously for the first time in 221 years. Crops from both countries will be decimated. Unlike Myanmar and Brazil, Indonesia has no cicada population. I was surprised to see Indonesian sesame seed futures priced so low. I made a purchase, and now if the shortage spikes the global price even 10%, will commence. And $6 to $8 million. If you wish, I could tap that projected revenue and make you a bridge loan of $15 million, gentlemen. Unless you need more. No.
See? I told you.
And now, Evan.
All right. So that was a kind of a unique example of thematic investing. It's a little bit different than what we're looking at because they're investing in commodities and futures and we're investing in private companies, right? But all that to say, you know, in this scene, he discovers a unique pain point that no one else has seen, right? And he's going out to invest in that, right? It's a year out in the future. We're looking at 5 to 10 years down the road. But anyways, all that to say, if you can extract unique insights in the verticals that you're looking at, you can oftentimes make a lot of money from it if you're right. So here is an example of how to take the thematic approach, right? This is a market map of the marketing technology landscape, or MarTech. There are 5,000 companies in here, right? But this is one way that VCs will often try to extract insights, is that they will map out every single company that they can think of across all the different verticals within MarTech, right? So you've got mobile, or you've got advertising and promotion, you've got social relationships, you've got data management, so on and so forth. And within those, you've got sub verticals, right? So in content and experience, you've got video marketing and email marketing and so on. And so you can go, like, I guess the next step would be, where in this massive market landscape do you think would there be an opportunity, right? Is it marketing? Is it video marketing, right? Is it SEO? I would say, like, maybe there's an opportunity to invest along like short form content, right? So we've seen that Instagram Reels and TikTok have been really successful at sharing short form content in the form of videos, right? What if we built a company around invested in a company around enabling creators to create those videos for marketing purposes, right? Or, back to any companies that kind of worked in and around that space. So then you would go out and try to find the companies in that space, see who's doing it, talk to all those companies and those founders to see which one do you think is going to be the best one to invest in. Or you can take, the Tiger Global approach and just invest in everyone, right? You won't have the opportunity to do that. You have to pick one company for this competition, but there are different ways to go about that, right? Depending on the reach that you have with your fund. Okay. So for you in this competition, how do you go about finding exciting themes, right? I think the best and easiest place to start is with your own experience, right? Where are the gaps? Like, what do you experience on a day-to-day basis that you think needs to be solved with technology? What are some softwares that people must use but hate, right? What are some things in your life that you have to use on a day-to-day basis but are just absolutely kind of a waste of time? And what does the future look like, right? So in that last slide, there was a segment on email marketing. Who thinks that email marketing is the future? It's probably a little bit tapped out by now, right? Email marketing. Who knows who MailChimp is? Yeah, who's used MailChimp? What do you love about MailChimp? It's quick, it's convenient. Okay, then what do you hate about it? Yeah. Okay. So engagement is an issue. Okay. What about the actual user experience? Do you enjoy that? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I've been using MailChimp a lot for communications for this competition specifically. And I love MailChimp, but the more that I use it, the more I find myself limited from a design perspective, right? So what I do a lot of the time is I go to Canva, I'll make a bunch of the design stuff on there, and then I'll just copy paste it as an image over to MailChimp, and it looks a lot nicer. And no matter what, MailChimp does not allow you to have those designs look that nice based on their current kind of low code, no code system. So for me, I'm like, look, that is a pain point that needs to be solved. It's basically merging MailChimp and Canva, which is a combined, what is that, $19-20 billion in enterprise value. That could be a pretty good company, right? So that's just an example of thinking through your daily life and the things that you use to try to find a theme to invest around. I think that and here's another, that's opportunistic. Okay. There are also some great blogs that you should read. A16Z.com is the website for Andreessen Horowitz, one of the other top venture capital firms. They actually post a ton of content. It's not just the team and the companies they've invested in. It's here's what we think the future is going to look like, and here's where we're putting our dollars, right? So there's a lot of really good articles on developments in specific industries and their outlooks and things like that. Stratechery is another really great website. It talks about sort of business strategy in tech companies, and there's some really great articles on there as well. TribeCapAVC.com or some other great resources to use just to get familiar with how VCs are thinking about the future and where they think money is going to go. I don't know that they're going to be 100% right, but I think it'll hopefully stir up some potential ideas on how to develop a theme to invest around. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Here's an example where it worked, where it's worked for me beyond the MailChimp Canva example. I was trying to go to a concert. I live right next to this concert hall in Reynoldstown called the Eastern, and I wanted to get a ticket to go. It was starting in 20 minutes, and I'm sitting there on Ticketmaster, and it is just or not Ticketmaster, I think it was AXS. It was just so incredibly clunky and difficult and slow to use. You click that you want to buy the ticket, and you get a 10-minute timer on how long you get to check out with your to buy those tickets. And it's I really don't need 10 minutes to put in my information, my credit card and all that. It should just be as easy as this is stored, click, done. And then what was really funny is when you check out, it's they send you 4 little advertisements to click through, and none of them are even close to relevant for what I was looking for. One was I don't know, HelloFresh, one was SiriusXM, and 2 other random ones, right? There's got to be a quicker and better way to to buy tickets to events, especially if you're buying them at the last minute. And it turns out that there was a company, it's called Game Time, that we ended up investing in. They're all about last minute tickets, to the point where the ticket prices will actually come down as you get closer and closer to the actual event, because as a ticket holder, if you own those tickets, you want to make sure that they're sold off, that you're not just like losing money on that, right? So the ticket prices are coming down. The actual checkout experience is very user centric. So it's just like, I want these tickets. You click 3 buttons and you're checked out in 30 seconds. Like, it's incredibly fast. The tickets are on your phone. You're good to go. So that was a company that we ended up investing in that, I mean, is doing a ton of revenue this year. They were obviously completely crushed by COVID when all live events went to zero, but they've come out of that really strong. And, you know, we're hoping it's going to be one of the brighter spots in our portfolio. Okay, let's run through an exercise. Where do you think the future 5 to 10 years from now will look like? Like, where do you think a lot of dollars will be invested? Yeah. So in 5 to 10 years from now, where do you think you want to be investing in? Like, where do you think a lot of money is going to flow to? Where do you think, what verticals are going to be successful? Yeah. What's that? Data analytics. Okay. Why is that? Okay. That data analytics, because they want to know like customer trends, what people are buying, so you can extract it's and things like that. Renewable energy. Why is that? Yep. Yeah. So he said climate change is a big issue and people are wanting to invest there. We're going to come back to that. Yep. In memory. Okay. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. You did watch Silicon Valley, right? Oh, you didn't? You should. Like, the whole point of the show is that he builds a company like around like data storage, distributed data storage. It's really interesting. Yeah, you got to watch it. What's that? They were, yeah. You get candy, because I was hoping someone was going to say climate change so that I could actually run through my example here. Climate tech, right? A couple of reasons that I think that climate tech is going to be really important in the future is, number one, our government's about to dump $740 billion into this industry, right? That's a lot of funding to go into this. So you can imagine that there are going to be a lot of great companies that will come up and benefit from that investment, right? Another I think is just cutting it out. Just really good. Zoom. Okay. Another really interesting trend that I think we've seen as a result of COVID is that you're seeing a lot more money being spent online to buy things. No one's going to stores anymore to buy stuff, right? Brick and mortar is dying. So e-commerce is coming out with a vengeance, right? So I think that maybe there should be a way to kind of marry both of those things, right? I mean, you think about e-commerce and the whole supply chain of all that, like how much is ordering, a tube of toothpaste from Amazon that's going to get put on a truck and put in a box with those little plastic bubble things so it doesn't break. Like that's got to be like, negatively affecting our environment, right? I wonder if there are companies that can help you kind of offset that environmental impact. All right, let's go check that out. Oh, look, all those carbon offsetting companies. That's incredible. Let's go check out a lot of these companies, right? So look at Patch. We did some research on. They enable a lot of companies on the back end to offset their carbon. EcoCart, actually founded by a former University Growth Fund student, an alum of ours. What EcoCart does is at checkout, you can click a button to pay, I don't know, $2.50 to totally offset the carbon footprint of your purchase, right? Cloverly is an Atlanta company that does a very similar thing. So if you start to make bets in those types of companies, you're like, I think e-commerce is growing. I think carbon offsetting is a huge need. You make investments into those companies and hopefully one of them wins. Now, what do you do after you've sort of gone down this road of thematic investing, right? How do you get in contact with the company? Well, for EcoCart, it was as simple as we know one of the founders, right? But a lot of it has to do, and Donald was talking about this a little bit too, is, with relationship building, the quickest and easiest way to kind of get in front of an entrepreneur is through a warm intro. So like hopefully someone knows someone at that company, and that's probably going to be your most effective way at getting in front of entrepreneurs. And we'll talk about some of the other ways to interface with entrepreneurs here in a second too. Okay. Any questions on thematic investing? I had a question online here. Oh, Naya said transportation. Yeah, absolutely. Transportation also, and we'll talk about this in a second, is a massive market when you think about Uber and Lyft and those types of companies. Okay, opportunistic approach. So you're just looking for great deals generally, rather than looking for the best deal in one specific industry, right? You're not doing these massive market maps and picking the best winners. You're really just you're opportunistic about it. In that, for me specifically, that's how I do a lot of my deal sourcing and investing is through my network, right? So I've got monthly calls, quarterly calls set up with other investors in the Atlanta area and some around the nation as well. So unfortunately for you, as part of this competition, you're probably not going to have that deep of a network set up with venture capitalists, right? So you're going to have a bit of a mix of the thematic approach, which I think is a great way for you to sort of develop an investment thesis. But two, you're going to be a little opportunistic as well, in that some of the resources that we'll share with you to find deals are going to be opportunistic in nature. So with like the We funders and the Start Engines and the Republics, that's going to be sort of your simulated network, right? Those are just websites with a ton of great companies on there. So you can just go to those websites, start looking through companies and pick the ones that you think are going to be winners. So don't just go and look at all, 500 companies on the website. Like maybe develop a bit of a thematic approach in that maybe you want to invest only in fintech companies, or maybe you have a marketing background. So you want to look at marketing technology companies, right? Or maybe you have a passion for healthcare companies, right? So go look at companies in those specific sectors. It's just a lot easier if you have some sort of base knowledge and drive around that sector to get smart on it, right? So yeah, you still need to refine your approach to some degree, right? Because if you're looking at a company that's a fintech company and you're benchmarking that against a consumer products company, it's really hard for you to compare apples and oranges, right? To know which investment could potentially be better, right? How do you know? You can't put them up next to each other to benchmark them. So if you take a bit of a thematic approach, I think that'll be really helpful for y'all. Okay. So things to look for in potential deals. Look, you're going to be looking hopefully at a ton of companies, right? The first 3 companies that you encounter are not going to be the ones that you probably end up using for this competition. So look, we as VCs encounter tons of deals on a weekly basis, right? There's got to be a way for us to kind of sort through those things quickly, right? So there's a little bit of a checklist, right? This is sort of the primary one. Does it have a unique product or business model, right? What is its competitive advantage? So you think about Kinley, right? With Donald, who we were talking to a second ago. What is their unique product or business model, right? They're building banking solutions for Black individuals, right? In addition, they're solving specific pain points that companies like the Wells Fargos and the JP Morgans of the world may not be able to tackle for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're built on this ancient code base called COBOL, right? It's really hard to innovate on top of that. You have the whole neobank space, which is essentially just a software layer built on top of banking, on top of a bank that can move faster, that can serve its consumers a lot better, that can innovate a lot faster than its banking partners. And what's the competitive advantage, right? That's the biggest thing for me is like, what is a sustainable, right? Not just, at point in time, what is a sustainable over time competitive advantage? So pricing, not always a competitive advantage, right? It's not always sustainable. In Donald's case, the competitive advantage is that it's very affinity and community based. And if that is a story that the consumers believe in, then they can acquire customers for a lot lower of a cost than your other banks, right? And so that's sort of their competitive advantage. The next thing is how big is the market, right? Like when you're investing in seed stage companies, they might pivot 10 times before they find out exactly what they're going to be doing. There's a company that I'm mentoring through Techstars right now. It's an 8 to 10 week process. The company's pivoted 3 times in that 8 to 10 weeks, right? And they've all been steps in the right direction. I don't know if we've exactly figured out, the perfect end to that journey, but all that to say, companies do pivot several times throughout their journey. And so since they do pivot, is there enough money in this space, in that market, that they can still capitalize on and build a successful company? Yeah. It's a great question. I think a lot of seed stage investing is betting on the founder and then the market. They can pivot, and like successful and great founders will find ways to be successful with the businesses they're building. And so as long as you know that they're in a big market that they can capitalize on, yeah, pivots are great, especially if they're in the right direction, right? And you won't know that, right? Think about when Airbnb first started, the guy was like, man, there's this big conference. One of the founders, or the founder, was like, there's a huge conference coming to San Francisco. All the hotels are sold out. I'm going to blow up a few air mattresses, put them on the floor, go on Craigslist and charge people $30 a night. And you know what he found? That there was a lot of demand for that, right? So at the time, the market is what the market for sleeping on people's air mattresses on the floor, like that's tiny. No one's going to do that. But you zoom out, the market is hospitality, and that industry is massive, right? Then you're going up against like the Sands and Marriott's and Hilton's and all those like big companies, right? And then the last thing is like the team. The team is everything, right? Are they experienced? Are they passionate? Do they have what we call team market fit or founder market fit? Or do they have an earned secret, right? So first-time founders are oftentimes difficult for VCs to back because, as Donald was talking about, we don't know what your track record is, right? You've never done this before. You might need a lot of help, so on and so forth. Now, are some of the greatest companies founded by first-time founders? Absolutely, right? So it's not an end-all be-all rule, but if they have experience, it's definitely helpful. This idea of founder market fit or team market fit is, has the entrepreneur worked in the space long enough to develop unique insights, unique relationships that they can build a business around? And then it also lends credence to this idea of an earned secret, right? Maybe you've worked in the industry so long that you know that there are huge, massive pain points that need to be solved that you can build a business around that no one else knows about because they don't work in this space, right? They don't know the secrets that you've earned by working in the industry for an extended period of time, right? And then the secondary things are to ask are, can this company scale fast? Right? Because ultimately in venture capital, we're investing in high growth companies that can scale really quickly, right? We're not going to invest in, I hate to use this example again because I love Rose's Pizza, but we're not going to invest in Rose's Pizza, right? They're not going to grow that fast as a brick and mortar pizza shop. Now, conversely, who here has heard of Mr. Beast? You guys know who that is, right? So it's a food company that scaled incredibly quickly, right? And they don't have any brick and mortar locations. What they do is they send their ingredients and their supplies and all that to dark kitchens around the country. And then they only sell through like DoorDash and Uber Eats and all that, right? So look, that was a way for them to go from 0 restaurants to they still have 0 restaurants, but they're doing, millions of dollars in sales a year. Look, and if that's not like part of the company's business plan or model, then that's probably not where you want to be investing anyways. Do they have unique access or partners? Like this is the perfect example for Donald, right? Partners, Forerunner is an incredible consumer business or investment firm. In addition, they were early investors in Chime, right? Chime is an incredible neobank. And so they can extract some of those learnings from Chime and then help Donald build a business around that as well. And then unique access is to the Black community, right? Donald is building this company to benefit that community. He's building really strong features such as, how do you build generational wealth and financial literacy and things like that? And then how do you specifically market to that demographic, right? In a way that is honest and truthful and really resonates with that group. We already talked about, is it in a huge market, but does it also have unfair advantages over its competitors? right? So the reason that Facebook is so effective is because of this idea of network effects, right? You're not going to switch to a different social media platform unless all of your friends are on there, right? That's Facebook's secret sauce, is that everyone is on there. And so there's no point in going to a social network where your friends are not on there, right? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. You'll be the only one on there. What are some other unfair advantages? Let's see. It's a company we looked at recently that we ended up investing in. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So there's this company called Fetch, and what they do is they deliver packages specifically to apartment complexes, right? And you're like, all right, well, USPS does that, FedEx does that, UPS does that. But here's what you don't know. Those delivery companies have no idea what to do once they get to your apartment complex. There's different buildings and floors and doors and keys. Like, how do you even navigate dropping these packages off? Okay, cool. So just dump it in a package room. I live in an apartment complex. It would take me 30 minutes to find one package because it was such a freaking mess in there, right? So the unfair advantage that Fetch has is they actually get apartment complexes to add an extra $15 a month to the lease, and then the residents will pay for this this delivery service. Now, the reason why that's an unfair advantage is because there is no reason to rip that out of the lease. Like, why would an apartment complex ever want to reduce how much money they're collecting, right? So once they sign a customer, they're never going to turn off unless you completely like blow it, right? They're never going to turn off. So they have this unfair advantage of once you get on there, you're never going to go to with another service. And look, FedEx loves it, UPS loves it, because all they have to do now is take it from their, like the airport where all the packages come in, and they drop it off to like another warehouse with a big 18-wheeler instead of delivering it what's called last mile delivery, right? So the little UPS trucks and FedEx trucks. That's the most expensive part of the delivery value chain. And so FedEx and UPS is like, yeah, if you want to take that, go for it. We don't want to touch that, right? So good example. And then finally, can the company create liquidity in the next 5 to 10 years? AKA, can it be acquired or go public, right? So if you think the company can get to a size where it can feasibly go public, that's awesome. You love that. Or can it be acquired by Google, by, I don't know, maybe it's like a cosmetics or a beauty company. And so L'Oreal is going to come in and buy it. Or maybe it's like Kinley, right? It's a neobank and can easily get scooped up by an Ally Bank, a Wells Fargo, JP Morgan. They've got tons of money to buy companies, right? And the same thing with Google. You know, people often think, oh man, you're building this company that like Google can just eat up in a heartbeat, or like innovate and build a solution to compete with. Google's such a big organization now that they don't do that. They'll just buy you, right? So is there a market? Is there a buyer for the company that you're looking at? If so, that's another one of the things that you want to optimize around. Okay, so just to reiterate kind of the fund assumptions here, you are investing, in this case, competition, out of a $50 million fund. We are in year one of a 10-year fund, right? So you pretty much have all that $50 million to invest in. So it says that you're targeting 30 to 50 seed and early stage deals. You can come up with your investment strategy as you see fit, right? So the whole point of making several bets is that you know that most of them are going to fail, and that a handful of them are going to drive the returns, right? That's the power law distribution we talked about last week. So if you're making 30 to 50 seed stage investments, you're really hoping that, 6 to 10 of them are going to drive most of your profits. So if you're doing 30 to 50 investments, you have to assume that your investments can generate a 30 to 50x return. You can take the other side of it, right? And say, all right, well, maybe I'll only do 10 investments of 5 million each, right? So you're now in the realm of, okay, you really got to spend a lot of time with this company to make sure that this is the one you want to back, and then reserve capital for future investments, and so on and so forth. I was talking to this investor here recently, and he was super blunt and honest about how they invested. He said, we had exactly 2 companies that crushed it, right? They returned, 2 or 3 times the fund between the 2 of them. And when they got to sort of the later years of their fund, when deciding what to do with the rest of their capital, they decided to invest it in their other companies that were not performing so well. They're like, look, maybe if we give them more money, they can figure it out, turn it around, and make us some more money. They ended up either losing or just breaking even on those investments, when instead, if they would have just backed those winners, they would have made another multiple or two on those investments, right? All that to say, back your winners, right? And then reserve capital to invest in those winners. Right? And another thing to think about is ownership targets, right? So do you need to be, a 10% owner of a company? If so, what does that look like going forward, right? So if the company is raising $1 million at a $9 million pre-money valuation, that means it's a $10 million post, which means you own 10% of the company. If that company gets acquired, it goes public and is valued at $1 billion, what is that? 1,000x return, right? In order to still own, if you maintain ownership of that company at 10%, you'll have netted $100 million, right? So if that company raises in subsequent rounds, in order for you to maintain that 10%, you have to invest in 10% of every future fundraising round. So if the company goes out and raises $50 million in a couple of years, you have to invest $5 million, right? So you just got to think about like how much capital you're going to reserve as it relates to what your ownership targets are. Okay. Here are some places to look for deals. Okay. When we talked about opportunistic investing, how it was very relationship driven, this is where you're going to get your relationship, right? It's just going to be these websites that have all of the deals for you. The three that I recommend are WeFunder, Republic, and Start Engine. If you can get access to AngelList, that's a pretty decent one as well. And then also one that's not on here is called Stonks, Stonks. They actually do like a ton of really good demo days. They've got like a couple or like 2 or 3 every week, and there's some really good deals on there as well. You just click a button, it'll connect you with the founder. So it's another really good way to get in front of founders. Look, as long as you can get reliable data, so like we want you to be able to look at some sort of financials, and these websites will have those posted, which is why this is the easiest method. The alternative method is to go and build one, build a thematic investment approach, and 2, go and find entrepreneurs in that space and then convince them to let you look at their diligence, knowing full well that you're probably not going to write a check into that company, but they will have some sort of exposure to VCs through this competition. So that's kind of the carrot here. The one caveat is there's no promise of confidentiality with these entrepreneurs and the information they share with us, because we're posting the videos online and we have no idea what you guys are going to do throughout this competition afterwards, if you're going to post it on Instagram or whatever. So there's no we're not having you sign NDAs. There's no promise of confidentiality. 2 places here in Atlanta that I highly recommend checking out that will have some really great seed stage companies. Number 1, the Russell Innovation Center for Entrepreneurship, right? It's an accelerator, which means that they're taking a bunch of companies that are kind of at the idea stage and then helping them grow those companies, either through investment or partnerships or introductions, things like that. The other one is Atlanta Tech Village. They're kind of like a co-working space for similar stage companies at the seed stage, right? Ton of great companies there. So yeah, those are a couple like local places to source great deals. Next week, Venture Atlanta. It's Atlanta, actually the premier venture capital conference for the Southeast. There will be a ton of companies there that are pitching, right? They've got a whole startup battle. If you can get tickets to that event, I highly recommend it. I think it was free for students actually. So if those tickets are still available, or if you want to email the conference organizer, they might be able to hook you up with tickets still. I don't know. They did sell out last week, so it might be a little tough, but I would highly recommend it too, because you'll hear a bunch of great business ideas, a bunch of really good panels, so on and so forth. Just a great networking opportunity. Okay, and finally, we're wrapping up here. So just some dates to be aware of. Next week, we're doing our 3rd workshop on, it'll be on due diligence. So we're going to cover business models and business strategies, how to evaluate markets and competition. But really important date here, the one with the star next to it, October 21st. You should find 3 companies that you think are worthy of evaluating for investment. And then we're going to have you submit just like a little mini write-up. I'll send out a Google form so you can just put in the company name and a short description. You ultimately don't have to use one of these 3. for the competition, but it's probably going to make more sense if you just do that, right? Yeah, and then we'll just keep moving on. The week after that, we've got our 4th workshop on due diligence. We'll cover financials and returns modeling, and so on and so forth. I think, okay, so next week, that should say October 20th. I always mess this slide up. October 20th at 5 p.m. here. We're going to be back upstairs at the joiner room, so 1242 on the 12th floor. If you have not signed up yet, I know a few of you are newer to the competition here. Sign up by tonight, and I'll share all those links with you, and then get you paired up with a team if you don't have one yet. That is all. If this is your first time coming to one of these, I'll stick around for 10 minutes and share with you the links that you're going to need to get signed up. Okay. Thank you everyone for sticking around. I know we went a little bit over, but hopefully Donald being here was really valuable. And yeah, thank you.